The wolf tattoo on his neck was moving. Sarah Martinez pressed her back against the farmhouse door, her heart hammering as she stared at the man bleeding out on her porch. Snow whipped around him in the howling wind, already covering his massive frame in white, but she could still make out the leather vest and the words stitched across his broad back, President. A biker. Of course it had to be a damn biker. Mama! 8-year-old Emma's voice drifted from the kitchen. What's that noise? Sarah's hands shook as she looked at the man again. Blood seeped through the snow beneath him, dark and spreading. In the flickering porch light, his face was pale as death, lips blue with cold. But that tattoo on his neck, a snarling wolf's head, seemed to shift and writhe in the shadows. She was losing her mind. Had to be. 3 months of fighting the bank, 3 months of watching her kids go to bed hungry more nights than not, and now hallucinations. Nothing, baby, she called back. Stay in the kitchen with Jake. The man's eyes snapped open. Sarah gasped, stumbling backward. His eyes weren't brown or blue or green, they were gold. Bright, burning gold like coins in firelight. Help, he whispered, and his voice was rough gravel. Please. Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door. Lock it. Pretend she'd never seen him. The last biker who'd darkened her door had left her with a split lip, 2 broken ribs, and trust issues that ran bone deep. But the storm was getting worse. The weatherman had called it a once-in-a-decade blizzard, the kind that killed people caught outside. And despite the leather vest and the intimidating tattoos covering his arms, despite everything her ex-husband Tommy had put her through, she couldn't watch a man die on her porch. Damn it, she muttered, pushing the door open wider. Can you walk? He tried to push himself up and collapsed back down with a grunt of pain. Sarah could see the knife wounds now, 3 deep gashes across his back, slicing through the leather like it was paper. She grabbed his arm and nearly jerked her hand back. His skin was burning hot, like he was running a fever of 106. But he was lucid, those strange gold eyes focused on her face. Heavy, he mumbled as she tried to help him up. No kidding. Sarah grunted, getting her shoulder under his arm. He had to be 6'4" and built like a linebacker. Come on, big guy. Work with me here. They stumbled through the door together, Sarah's legs shaking under his weight. She managed to get him to the old couch in the living room before her strength gave out. He collapsed onto the faded cushions with a sound that was half groan, half growl. Mama! Emma appeared in the doorway, her eyes going wide. Who's that? Go back to the kitchen, Sarah said firmly. Keep Jake company. Watch a movie or something. But, now Emma. Her daughter's lower lip trembled, but she obeyed. Sarah waited until she heard the kitchen door close before turning back to the stranger on her couch. He was unconscious again, his breathing shallow and ragged. In the warm light of the living room, she could see him clearly for the first time. Dark hair, strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and those impossible tattoos covering every visible inch of skin. The wolf on his neck was just ink. It had to be, but there were others. A full moon on his forearm. Strange symbols she didn't recognize running up his spine. And scars. Lots of them. Old ones, white and faded, crisscrossing his arms and chest like a roadmap of violence. Sarah fetched her first aid kit and a basin of warm water. She'd been a paramedic before the kids came along, before Tommy convinced her she didn't need to work, that he'd take care of everything. The skills came back like riding a bicycle. She cut away his destroyed vest and shirt, exposing the knife wounds. They were deep but clean, missing anything vital. Lucky for him. She cleaned them carefully, trying not to think about how his skin seemed to radiate heat like a furnace. The pack, he mumbled suddenly, making her jump. His eyes were still closed, but he was talking. Have to warn the pack. Shoo, Sarah murmured, applying antiseptic. You're safe now. Silver blades. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. His eyes snapped open, that unsettling gold burning bright. They used silver. Sarah's blood chilled. She'd seen knife wounds before, plenty of them. But she'd never seen metal react to a blade the way his skin was reacting now. The edges of the cuts were angry and red, inflamed like an infection, but they'd only happened hours ago. What's your name? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Marcus, he said, his grip on her wrist loosening. Marcus Kellerman. I'm Sarah. You're going to be okay, Marcus. But you need to rest. He was fighting to stay conscious, those gold eyes tracking her movements as she bandaged his wounds. Why help me? Sarah paused, tape halfway around his ribs. Why was she helping him? Because she was an idiot, probably. Because despite everything Tommy had put her through, she couldn't stand by and watch someone die. Because it's the right thing to do, she said finally. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or gratitude. You smell like... He stopped himself, shaking his head. Nothing. Sorry. Outside, the wind howled like something alive and angry. Snow pelted against the windows with increasing fury. Sarah glanced toward the kitchen, thinking of her kids. The power was already flickering, and if they lost heat? The storm's getting worse, Marcus said, following her gaze. His voice was stronger now, though she could see the effort it cost him to speak. Radio said it's supposed to last 3 days. 3 days. Trapped in her farmhouse with a biker who had knife wounds and hallucinations about silver blades. Whose skin ran hot as a forge, and whose eyes were the wrong color entirely. Get some rest, she said, pulling a blanket over him. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. But as she headed toward the kitchen to check on her kids, she heard him whisper something that made her blood run cold. They'll come for me. The pack always comes for its own. Chapter 2. The rumble started before dawn, low and distant like thunder that wouldn't quit. Sarah jerked awake on the kitchen chair where she'd dozed off, her neck stiff from keeping watch over Marcus through the night. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind an eerie silence that the approaching sound cut through like a blade. She crept to the window and pushed aside the curtain. What she saw made her blood turn to ice water. Motorcycles. Dozens of them, emerging from the gray pre-dawn light like mechanical wolves materializing from mist. They moved in perfect formation down her long driveway, their headlights cutting through the lingering snow. The lead bike was massive, its rider even more so, and as they drew closer, Sarah could count them. 10, 20, 50. More kept coming. Dear God, she whispered, backing away from the window. The sound grew louder, a mechanical symphony that seemed to make the very walls of her farmhouse vibrate. By the time they reached her front yard, she counted nearly 100 bikes forming a semicircle around her home. The riders sat motionless on their machines, engines idling in perfect synchronization, like they were waiting for some invisible signal. Sarah's hands shook as she checked the locks on her doors. Fat lot of good they'd do against this many men. Her mind raced, calculating distances to her truck, to her children's rooms, to the old hunting rifle in her bedroom closet. Sarah! Marcus's voice, stronger now but still rough with pain. She spun around to find him sitting up on the couch, those gold eyes alert and focused. The fever flush was gone from his cheeks and somehow, impossibly, he looked better. Not healed, she could see the white bandages beneath his unbuttoned shirt, but better than any man with those injuries had a right to look. Your friends? She asked, nodding toward the window. My pack. The word came out naturally, like he'd forgotten to be careful. Then his eyes sharpened. My club. They came for me. Outside, the rumbling stopped. 100 Harley-Davidsons fell silent as one, and the sudden quiet was more terrifying than the noise had been. Heavy boots crunched through snow toward her door. Marcus, Sarah said, her voice tight with fear. My children are upstairs. Something flickered across his face, surprise, then what might have been respect. They won't be harmed. You have my word. The word of a biker? Sarah couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. Forgive me if that doesn't exactly comfort me. Before Marcus could respond, 3 sharp knocks echoed through the house. Not the frantic pounding of men in a hurry, but the measured beats of someone who expected to be answered. Alpha. The voice carried through the door, gravelly and respectful. We're here. Alpha? Sarah's eyebrows shot up, but Marcus was already struggling to his feet. Stay behind me, he said, moving toward the door with careful, measured steps. Despite his injuries, despite the blood loss, he carried himself like a man who commanded respect. Like a man used to being obeyed. He opened the door, and Sarah got her first good look at Marcus Kellerman's club. They were enormous, every single one of them. Men built like prizefighters and linebackers, wearing leather vests identical to Marcus's. But it wasn't their size that made Sarah's breath catch. It was their eyes. Even in the pale morning light, she could see the unnatural gleam in their gazes as they looked at Marcus. Not just respect or loyalty, but something deeper. Something that made the hair on her arms stand up. The man in front was older than the others, his graying hair pulled back in a ponytail, a jagged scar running from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. When he looked at Marcus, his expression was pure relief. Jesus, Ghost, he said, using what Sarah assumed was Marcus's road name. We thought we'd lost you. Takes more than 3 rival assholes with knives to put me down, Razor. Marcus's voice had changed, taken on an edge of authority that made Sarah step back instinctively. This wasn't the wounded man she'd nursed through the night. This was someone else entirely. Razor's eyes swept past Marcus to land on Sarah, and she fought the urge to cross her arms over her chest. His gaze was intense, calculating, like a predator sizing up potential prey. "This the woman who helped you?" he asked. "Sarah Martinez," Marcus said. "She saved my life." A murmur went through the men gathered behind Razor, and Sarah caught fragments. "Owes her. Debt of honor. Protected the alpha. Mama." Emma's voice drifted down the stairs, small and frightened. Sarah's protective instincts flared. "Stay upstairs, baby. Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. These men were looking at Marcus like he was their king, and at her like she was a problem that needed solving. She could practically feel the violence radiating off them, barely leashed and ready to slip its chains. "We need to talk," Razor said to Marcus, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "About territory. About the Blackwater Pack's little message last night." Blackwater Pack. Not Club Pack. Sarah filed that away with all the other strange things that were piling up around Marcus Kellerman. "Inside," Marcus said. "Just you and Kane." A younger man stepped forward, his dark hair falling across sharp cheekbones. He moved with a fluid grace that reminded Sarah of a dancer, or a hunter. When he looked at her, she saw the same unnatural gleam in his eyes that the others had. "The rest of you stay put," Marcus ordered. "And keep it quiet. There are children in this house." The authority in his voice was absolute. Nearly 100 hardened bikers nodded like schoolchildren and settled back to wait. Sarah had never seen anything like it. Marcus led Razor and Kane into her living room, and Sarah found herself following despite every instinct telling her to grab her kids and run. This was her house, damn it, and whatever was happening here involved her now. "The Blackwater boys hit you at Murphy's bar," Razor said without preamble, settling into Sarah's armchair like he owned it. "3 of them with silver blades, caught you when you were meeting with the truckers about the shipping routes." Silver blades. Sarah remembered Marcus's feverish mumbling, the strange way his wounds had reacted. "I got 2 of them," Marcus said, easing back down onto the couch. "The third one ran when the sirens got close." "This was planned," Kane said, his voice carrying a slight accent Sarah couldn't place. "They knew you'd be there. Knew you'd be alone." "Someone's feeding them information," Marcus agreed. "Someone inside." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah watched these 3 men communicate in glances and half-words, discussing violence like other people discussed the weather. And underneath it all, she sensed something else. Something that made her skin crawl with primitive fear. "We'll find the leak," Razor said, and there was a promise of pain in his voice. "But right now we need to discuss the woman." Sarah's spine straightened. "The woman is standing right here." Razor smiled, and Sarah wished he hadn't. It wasn't a nice expression. "Ms. Martinez, you've done our president a great service. The club is in your debt." "I don't want anything from you," Sarah said quickly. "I just did what anyone would do." "Not anyone," Kane said quietly. "Most people would have shut the door. Especially on a man like Ghost." "The club takes care of its own," Razor continued, ignoring her protest. "And we take care of those who help our own. Your mortgage problems, for instance." Sarah's blood chilled. "How do you know about my mortgage?" "We know lots of things," Razor said. His smile widened, showing teeth that seemed too sharp. "We know the bank's foreclosing next month. We know your ex-husband left you with nothing but debt and bruises. We know you're working 3 jobs just to keep food on the table." "Stop." Marcus's voice cut through the room like a whip. "That's enough." But Razor wasn't finished. "We also know you've got 2 beautiful children upstairs. Emma, 8 years old, pretty little thing. And Jake, he's what, 5? 6? The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "Don't you dare." "No threats," Marcus said, and something in his tone made Razor back down immediately. "We're grateful, not predatory." "Of course," Razor said smoothly. "I was merely pointing out that the club is in a position to help. Your mortgage debt could disappear. Your children could have trust funds. All we ask in return is your discretion about last night." Sarah looked between the 3 men, reading the subtext loud and clear. "Take the money and keep your mouth shut, or bad things might happen to your family." "What if I refuse?" she asked. "Why would you?" Kane asked, seeming genuinely puzzled. "We're offering you a way out of debt slavery. A chance to give your children a future." Before Sarah could answer, small footsteps thudded down the stairs. Jake appeared in the doorway, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles, clutching his stuffed dinosaur against his chest. "Mama," he said, his voice still thick with sleep. The wolves are scared. Sarah's heart stopped. What did you say, baby? Jake pointed toward the front door, toward the yard full of bikers. The wolves. They're scared 'cause their leader got hurt, but now he's better, so they're happy scared. Like when you're better after being sick. The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah stared at her son, her mind reeling. He was pointing at the bikers, but talking about wolves. Talking about them like he could see something she couldn't. Razor and Kane were staring at Jake like he'd just sprouted wings. Marcus's face had gone very still, very careful. Jake, Sarah said slowly. What wolves, honey? The ones outside, Jake said matter-of-factly. They all smell like the big one. He pointed at Marcus. But different too. Like pack. The word hit the room like a bomb. Marcus leaned forward, his gold eyes intense. What else can you tell me about the wolves, Jake? Marcus, Sarah warned, stepping between him and her son. It's okay, Marcus said gently, but his attention never left Jake. I'm not going to hurt him. But this is important, Sarah. More important than you know. Jake peeked around his mother's legs, apparently unafraid of the large, tattooed biker. You're the alpha, he said simply. The others told me. They're worried about the other pack. The bad ones who hurt you. They don't like silver. It burns. Sarah's knees nearly gave out. Her 5-year-old son was casually discussing werewolf politics like he was talking about cartoon characters. How can you tell all this? Marcus asked, his voice gentler than Sarah had heard it yet. Jake shrugged. I just can. Can everybody? No, Marcus said quietly. Not everybody. Razor cleared his throat. Well, he said, and his voice held a note of something like awe. That changes things. Changes what? Sarah demanded, pulling Jake closer. Your son is gifted, Kane explained, his earlier hostility replaced by something approaching reverence. He can sense our true nature. That's rare. Rare. Sarah's voice climbed an octave. What's rare? What true nature? The 3 men exchanged glances. Finally, Marcus spoke. Sarah, sit down. There are things you need to know. Things about me, about my club. About what your son can see that others can't. I don't want to sit down, Sarah said, backing toward the stairs with Jake in tow. I want you all to leave. Now. We can't do that, Razor said, and the gentleness was gone from his voice. Not anymore. The boy's seen too much, knows too much. That makes him valuable. And dangerous, Kane added quietly. The threat was clear. Sarah looked at Marcus, searching his face for some sign of the wounded man she'd helped through the night. But that man was gone, replaced by someone harder, more dangerous. Someone who might be exactly what her 5-year-old said he was. The pack protects its own, Marcus said finally. And now, whether you like it or not, that includes you and your children. Outside, as if summoned by his words, 100 motorcycles rumbled to life in perfect unison. The sound rolled across the snowy landscape like thunder, like the howl of something wild and untamed. Like the call of wolves claiming new territory. Chapter 3. Sarah knew something was wrong when she found Marcus on her kitchen floor at 3 a.m. He was on his hands and knees beside the refrigerator, his whole body shaking, sweat pouring off him despite the winter cold that had settled into the old farmhouse. When he looked up at her, his gold eyes were dulled with pain and something that looked like fear. I'm fine, he said before she could speak, but his voice was barely a whisper. Bullshit. Sarah dropped to her knees beside him, her hands automatically going to check his pulse. It was racing, erratic, like his heart was struggling to keep up with some internal battle. You're burning up again. It had been 3 days since Razor and his 100 bikers had made camp in her fields, turning her struggling farm into something that looked like a military operation. 3 days of armed men patrolling her property, of hushed conversations about territorial wars and pack politics, of her children adapting to their new reality with the unsettling ease that only kids possessed. 3 days of watching Marcus get progressively worse, even as he pretended otherwise. The wounds, she said, helping him struggle to his feet. They're infected, aren't they? Marcus leaned heavily against her kitchen counter, his breathing labored. In the harsh fluorescent light, she could see how much weight he'd lost, how the sharp edges of his cheekbones had become more pronounced. The strong, vital man who'd commanded absolute loyalty from nearly 100 followers was fading before her eyes. Not infected, he said finally. Poisoned. Sarah's blood chilled. Poisoned how? Before he could answer, the kitchen door swung open and Razor stepped inside. The lieutenant moved with his usual predatory grace, but Sarah caught the way his eyes immediately assessed Marcus's condition, the flash of something like panic that crossed his features before his expression locked down. Alpha, he said carefully. You should be resting. I'm fine, Marcus repeated, but he swayed on his feet. Razor looked at Sarah, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something other than calculated menace in his expression. She saw desperation. Tell her, Razor said quietly. Tell me what? Sarah demanded. Marcus closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, she could see the defeat there. The silver blades. They weren't just weapons, they were blessed. Cursed. Dipped in something that makes silver poisoning permanent. Sarah's medical training kicked in, even as her mind reeled at the implications. Silver poisoning isn't real. It's a myth, Not for us, Marcus said simply. For my kind, silver is like radiation. It burns, it spreads, it kills if you can't purge it from your system. And whatever the Iron Wolves did to those blades, whatever they dipped them in, it's keeping the poison active. It's not healing. The Iron Wolves. She'd heard that name whispered among the bikers over the past few days, always with a mixture of anger and fear. How long? She asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Razor spoke when Marcus couldn't. The pack shaman says maybe a week. 2 at the outside. Sarah stared at them both, processing what they were telling her. Marcus Kellerman, the alpha of the Death's Head pack, the man who commanded the absolute loyalty of nearly 100 supernatural bikers, was dying. Slowly, painfully, from wounds she'd bandaged with her own hands. There has to be something, she said. Some kind of treatment, some way to... There is, Marcus said, his voice barely audible. But it would mean abandoning everything. The territory, the pack, everything I've built. I don't understand. Razor moved to the kitchen window, peering out at the pre-dawn darkness where Sarah knew his men were keeping watch. There's a sanctuary, he explained without turning around. Up north, past the Canadian border. Neutral territory. The pack shamans there might be able to cleanse the poison, but if I leave now, Marcus finished, the Iron Wolves will move in. They'll slaughter everyone who stays behind. My pack, the humans under our protection, entire communities that depend on us keeping the worst things at bay. Sarah's mind raced. Over the past 3 days, she'd learned more about the supernatural world than she'd ever wanted to know. The biker clubs weren't just criminal organizations, they were supernatural packs keeping territories that had been established for generations. The Death's Head pack protected everything from the Ohio River to the Kentucky border, keeping rival packs from moving in, keeping the more dangerous supernatural creatures from preying on human communities. If Marcus died or fled, all of that protection would collapse. How many people are we talking about? She asked. Directly? Maybe 50,000 in small towns and rural communities, Razor said. Indirectly? Could be 10 times that. The Iron Wolves don't just want territory, they want hunting grounds. The casual way he said it made Sarah's stomach turn. Hunting grounds for what? Humans, Marcus said bluntly. The Iron Wolves don't believe in coexistence. They think humans are prey, nothing more. Cattle to be harvested. Sarah sank into one of her kitchen chairs, overwhelmed. This is insane. All of it. Werewolves and territorial wars and... She stopped, looking at Marcus. Really looking at him. Show me. What? Show me what you really are. If I'm supposed to believe all this, if my children are somehow part of this world now, I need to see it. Marcus and Razor exchanged glances. Sarah, Marcus said carefully, that's not. Show me, she repeated, steel in her voice. Or get the hell off my property. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Marcus nodded slowly. Outside, he said. Away from the children. They walked to the old barn behind the house, Razor flanking them like a bodyguard. The pre-dawn air was bitter cold, and Sarah could see her breath in white puffs. Around them, she sensed movement in the shadows, Marcus's pack, always watching, always protecting. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked. Sarah nodded, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Marcus stepped back, closing his eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Sarah heard a sound like fabric tearing, saw his body begin to shift and change in ways that her rational mind refused to process. Bones lengthened and reformed. Muscles bulged and rippled. Dark fur sprouted across his skin. His face elongated into a muzzle filled with teeth that could tear through steel. When the transformation was complete, a massive wolf stood where Marcus had been, easily 6 feet tall at the shoulder, with eyes that still burned gold and intelligence that was purely human. Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the snow, staring up at the creature that had been Marcus Kellerman. The wolf, Marcus, approached her slowly, carefully, like he was afraid of frightening her further. When he was close enough to touch, he lowered his massive head and looked into her eyes. She reached out with trembling fingers and touched his fur. It was warm, softer than she'd expected, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "You're beautiful," she whispered, and meant it. Something that might have been surprise flickered in those golden eyes. Then he was changing again, shifting back to human form with the same impossible fluidity. When it was over, Marcus knelt in the snow before her, naked and shivering and completely vulnerable. Sarah shrugged out of her coat and wrapped it around his shoulders. "How long have you been able to do that?" "Since I was 13, he said, his voice hoarse. "It runs in families, but not everyone carries the gene. I was the first in 3 generations. And Jake?" The question had been haunting her for days. "What he can see, what he knows." "He's gifted," Razor said. "Probably has werewolf ancestry somewhere in his bloodline, far enough back that he won't shift but close enough that he can sense us. It's rare, but it happens." Sarah helped Marcus to his feet, noting how much effort it took him. The transformation had drained him further, made the silver poisoning worse. "The Iron Wolves," she said as they walked back toward the house. "Tell me about them." "They used to be part of a larger organization," Marcus explained, leaning on her more than she suspected he wanted to admit. "Back in the old country, werewolf packs served as protectors, guardians of human communities. But some packs went rogue, decided they were apex predators instead of protectors. The Iron Wolves are descendants of those rogue packs. They've been trying to move into our territory for years," Razor added. "But Marcus has kept them out. Until now." "What's different now?" "They have a hunter working with them," Marcus said, and Sarah heard the hatred in his voice. "Someone who knows our weaknesses, who can bless silver weapons with curses that prevent healing. Someone who's been planning this war for a long time." They reached the house, and Sarah helped Marcus back inside. The kitchen felt warm and normal after the supernatural revelations in the barn, but she knew nothing would ever be normal again. "There's something else," Marcus said, settling heavily into a chair. "Something you need to know about your son." Sarah's protective instincts flared. "What about Jake?" "The gift he has, it makes him valuable to people like the Iron Wolves. They could use him to track packs, to identify werewolves who are trying to blend in with human society." "Over my dead body." "That's what they're counting on," Razor said grimly. "They take the gifted ones young, before their loyalty is fixed. Train them from childhood to serve the pack." Sarah felt sick. "You're saying they'd try to kidnap my son? If they knew about him?" "Absolutely." Marcus met her eyes. "That's another reason why my pack can't leave. We're the only thing standing between your family and them." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Stay and watch Marcus die, leaving her children vulnerable to supernatural predators. Or convince him to flee to save his life, abandoning thousands of innocent people to the Iron Wolves' idea of justice. "There has to be another way," she said. "There isn't," Marcus said flatly. "I've been fighting this war for 10 years. I know every angle, every possibility. The Iron Wolves have us cornered." Sarah studied his face, seeing the resignation there, the way he'd already accepted his death. But she also saw something else, the same fierce protectiveness she felt for her own children, extended to encompass not just his pack, but everyone under their protection. He was willing to die for people he'd never met, simply because it was his duty to protect them. "What if you didn't have to choose?" she asked slowly. Both men looked at her. "What do you mean?" Sarah's mind was racing, putting together pieces of information she'd gathered over the past few days. The Iron Wolves want territory, right? And they want Jake because of his gift. But what they really want is for your pack to be gone. Dead or fled, it doesn't matter to them. "That's right," Razor said cautiously. "So what if we gave them what they wanted? What if the Death's Head pack disappeared?" Marcus frowned. "Sarah, we can't just—" "Not really disappeared," she interrupted. "Just temporarily. What if there was a way to make them think you were dead, think the pack was scattered, long enough for you to heal? Long enough to come back and hit them when they weren't expecting it." The silence stretched out between them. Finally Razor spoke. "That's actually not impossible," he said slowly. "We have contacts in other territories, packs that owe us favors. If we could fake Ghost's death convincingly enough. The Iron Wolves would move in immediately," Marcus said. "They'd claim the territory before our allies could respond." "Let them," Sarah said. "Let them think they've won. But while they're celebrating, you're healing. And when you're strong enough, you come back and take back what's yours." Marcus stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You're talking about abandoning everything I've sworn to protect." "I'm talking about strategic retreat," Sarah corrected. about staying alive long enough to fight another day. She could see him considering it, weighing the costs and benefits. Around them, the house was quiet, her children still sleeping upstairs, unaware that their mother was planning a supernatural war. It could work, Razor said finally. We'd have to make it look real. Bloody. Convincing enough that the Iron Wolves don't question it. And we'd have to get the civilians out first, Marcus added. The humans in our territory, anyone who'd be in immediate danger. Sarah nodded. How long would you need? To heal, I mean. With the right shaman? Maybe a month. 6 weeks at the outside. That's a long time to keep up a deception. But not impossible, Razor said, and Sarah could see the plan taking shape in his mind. We could scatter the pack to allied territories, make it look like we're fleeing in panic. Some of the younger members could defect to other clubs, carry word that the Death's Head is finished. What about Jake? Marcus asked. The Iron Wolves will still want him. Sarah's jaw set. Then we make sure they never find him. She looked between the two men, seeing hope beginning to replace resignation in Marcus's eyes. It was a desperate plan, full of risks and unknowns. But it was better than watching him die slowly while innocent people suffered for his martyrdom. There's one more thing, she said quietly. If we do this, if we fake your death and scatter your pack, you'll need somewhere safe to heal. Somewhere the Iron Wolves would never think to look. Marcus met her eyes, understanding passing between them. Here, she said simply. You heal here with me. Chapter 4. Sarah was checking Marcus's temperature when the ancient Buick pulled into her driveway. She froze at the kitchen window, her hand still pressed against Marcus's fevered forehead. The car was powder blue with rust eating through the wheel wells, and it moved with the careful precision of someone who'd been driving for 70 years and didn't plan to stop now. No, Sarah whispered, recognition hitting her like a physical blow. Not now. Marcus stirred on the couch, his gold eyes struggling to focus. Over the past week, his condition had deteriorated rapidly despite her best efforts. The silver poisoning was spreading through his system like cancer, and even with Razor's pack shamans working around the clock, nothing seemed to slow its progress. Who is it? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah watched a small, elegant woman emerge from the driver's seat. Even at 78, Elena Martinez moved with the fluid grace of a dancer, her silver hair pinned back in the same tight bun Sarah remembered from childhood. She wore a simple black dress and carried a worn leather satchel that Sarah knew contained things most people would never believe. My grandmother, Sarah said, her mouth gone dry. Elena Martinez. The one who raised you. Marcus tried to sit up and failed, falling back against the pillows with a grunt of pain. After my parents died, yes. Sarah's mind raced. Of all the times for Elena to make one of her rare visits, why now? Why when her home was full of werewolves and supernatural politics? Elena climbed the porch steps with measured precision, and Sarah knew with growing dread that this wasn't a coincidence. Her grandmother had always possessed an uncanny ability to appear exactly when she was most needed, or most dangerous. The knock came at exactly 3 sharp raps, just as Sarah remembered. Mija. Elena's voice carried through the door, warm with affection but edged with something harder. Open the door. We need to talk. Sarah glanced at Marcus, seeing the question in his eyes. She shook her head slightly. Not yet, not until she understood why Elena was here. Her grandmother had always been different. Perceptive in ways that made Sarah uncomfortable, knowledgeable about things she shouldn't know. Sarah opened the door, and Elena Martinez stepped into her home like she owned it. Abuela, Sarah said, accepting the fierce hug that smelled of lavender and something medicinal she couldn't identify. What are you doing here? Taking care of family, Elena replied, but her dark eyes were already scanning the living room, taking in Marcus's prone form with an expression Sarah couldn't read. As I always have. Elena approached Marcus with the careful steps of someone assessing a dangerous animal. When she looked at him, Sarah saw recognition flash across her weathered features. Not surprise, but confirmation of something she'd already suspected. Alpha, Elena said simply, and Marcus's eyes snapped to hers with startled awareness. How do you? Sarah began, but Elena held up a hand for silence. How long? Elena asked Marcus, and somehow Sarah knew she was asking about the silver poisoning. Days, Marcus replied, his voice gaining strength as he focused on this new threat. Maybe less. Elena nodded as if she'd expected as much. The blessed blades. The Iron Wolves found themselves a real hunter, didn't they? The casual way she discussed supernatural politics sent ice through Sarah's veins. Abuela, how do you know about any of this? Elena finally looked at her granddaughter, and Sarah saw something in those dark eyes she'd never noticed before. Something that looked like grief and regret and terrible purpose. Sit down, Mija, Elena said gently. There are things you need to know. Things I should have told you years ago. Sarah remained standing. What things? Instead of answering, Elena opened her leather satchel and began removing items. A silver cross that seemed to gleam with its own light, a bundle of herbs tied with red string, and finally, a small wooden box that made Marcus growl low in his throat. Abuela, Sarah said, backing toward Marcus instinctively. What's in the box? Elena opened it with reverent care, revealing 6 silver bullets nestled in black velvet. But these weren't ordinary bullets. They were covered in intricate engravings that seemed to move in the lamplight, and they radiated a cold that made Sarah's teeth ache. These have been in our family for 4 generations, Elena said. Passed down from mother to daughter, along with the knowledge of how to use them. Sarah's world tilted on its axis. Our family, the Martinez bloodline, Elena continued, her voice taking on the cadence of someone reciting a familiar litany. Hunters, bred and trained to track and kill the supernatural creatures that prey on humanity. We are the sword in the darkness, the guardians who stand between the innocent and the monsters. No. Sarah shook her head violently. No, we're not. Your great-great-grandmother killed 7 werewolves in the Arizona territory. Your great-grandmother took down an entire vampire coven in Chicago. Your mother would have been one of our finest if she'd lived long enough to complete her training. The room was spinning. Sarah grabbed the back of a chair for support, her medical training warring with the impossible truths her grandmother was casually revealing. That's why you were so good with wounds, Mija, Elena continued. Why you always knew exactly where to cut, where to apply pressure. It's in your blood, the knowledge of how bodies work, and how they break. My parents died in a car accident, Sarah said desperately. You told me. I told you what a 7-year-old needed to hear. Elena's voice softened with genuine regret. Your parents were killed by a rogue werewolf pack in Nevada. They were hunting it when it turned the tables on them. Sarah felt Marcus trying to sit up behind her, heard his sharp intake of breath, as the movement aggravated his wounds. But she couldn't turn to help him, couldn't move at all under the weight of Elena's revelations. And Tommy? She whispered, though part of her already knew the answer. My husband. Elena's face grew hard. Thomas discovered the truth about our family. About what you were born to be. He was trying to protect you from it, trying to get you away from the life before you learned who you really were. The room went silent except for Marcus's labored breathing. Sarah felt pieces of her life rearranging themselves into new, terrible patterns. The motorcycle accident, she said. There was no accident, Elena confirmed. The society found out he knew our secrets. They couldn't risk him exposing us. The society? The organization that coordinates hunters worldwide. They saw Thomas as a threat to centuries of secrecy. Elena's voice carried old pain. I tried to warn him, tried to convince him to let you fulfill your destiny. But he was stubborn, that boy. Thought love could protect you from what you are. Sarah sank into the chair, her legs finally giving out. Tommy hadn't died because of some random accident. He'd been murdered because he'd tried to protect her from a destiny she'd never known existed. Sarah. Marcus's voice was strained but urgent. Look at me. She turned to find him struggling to prop himself up on one elbow, his gold eyes burning with intensity despite his weakness. Whatever she's told you, he said, whatever your family history is, you are not your bloodline. You choose who you are. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Spoken like a true monster. You've seduced her already, haven't you? Turned her against her own nature. I haven't turned her against anything, Marcus said, his voice gaining the edge of command that made hardened bikers obey without question. She chose to save my life because she's a good person, not because of some genetic programming. She saved your life because hunter blood recognizes predator blood, Elena snapped back. It's how we've survived for centuries. We know what you are the moment we see you. Sarah looked between them, seeing the ancient hatred crackling in the air between predator and hunter, between species that had been at war for millennia. The Iron Wolves, she said suddenly, understanding flooding through her. They have a hunter working with them. Elena nodded approvingly. My great-nephew, Gabriel. He was supposed to be your partner when you came of age, your hunting companion. But when Thomas died and you disappeared with the children, Gabriel lost his way. He went rogue. He decided that werewolves were too dangerous to be allowed to exist at all. Even the ones who try to coexist with humans. Elena's voice carried disappointment. The society believes in balance, in keeping the supernatural world in check without driving it to extinction. Gabriel believes in genocide. That's why the blessed blades won't heal, Marcus said, understanding dawning in his voice. He's not just using hunter knowledge, he's perverting it. Elena looked at him with something that might have been respect. The blessing on those blades isn't just silver poisoning, it's a blood curse. Gabriel bound it with hunter blood, made it specifically to prevent regeneration. Can it be reversed? Sarah asked desperately. Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus with clinical assessment. There is a way, she said finally. But it requires hunter blood to counter hunter blood. Someone from our bloodline would have to willingly break the curse. Sarah's heart leaped. Then do it. Break the curse. I can't, Elena said simply. The curse recognizes only direct bloodline. Gabriel used his own blood in the binding. Only Martina's blood can break it. The implication hit Sarah like a physical blow. You want me to save him? I want you to choose, Elena corrected. This is what I came here to give you. The choice I never had, that your mother never had. You can embrace what you are, take these blessed bullets, and fulfill 4 generations of family destiny. Or you can save the monster that's already half dead and damn yourself in the process. He's not a monster, Sarah said quietly. Isn't he? Elena challenged. How many people has he killed, Mija? How many lives has he taken with those claws and teeth? Sarah looked at Marcus, seeing the pain in his eyes, not just from the silver poisoning, but from the truth in Elena's words. He had killed. She'd seen it in the scars on his body, in the way his pack looked at him with a mixture of love and fear. Tell her, Elena pressed. Tell her about the blood on your hands, Alpha. Tell her about the humans who've died because you weren't strong enough, fast enough, careful enough. Enough, Sarah snapped, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. Enough from both of you. She stood up, pacing to the window where she could see Razor and his men maintaining their watch. Good men, she'd learned over the past week. Dangerous, yes, but protective of those under their care. Men who'd die before they let harm come to her children. You want me to choose, she said, not turning around. Fine. But first I want the whole truth. About Tommy, about my parents, about everything you've hidden from me. Elena sighed. Your parents were tracking a rogue pack in Nevada, one that had been killing entire families in rural communities. They got close, too close, and the pack Alpha decided to send a message. He tortured them before he killed them, made it last days. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. And you let them go alone? They insisted. Said it was too dangerous for a pregnant woman. Elena's voice carried decades of regret. I should have gone anyway. What about after? You raised me, trained me in first aid and anatomy. Were you preparing me to be a hunter? I tried to give you a normal life, Elena said. But the blood calls, Mija. It always calls. When you married Thomas, I thought maybe you'd found another way. But then he started asking questions, researching our family history. So the society killed him. Gabriel killed him, Elena corrected. Without authorization, without approval. The society was furious, but the damage was done. You disappeared, and we lost track of you until now. Sarah turned back to face her grandmother, seeing the old woman with new eyes. How did you find me? Elena's smile was sad. The same way hunters have always tracked their prey. I followed the scent of blood and silver. Marcus made a sound that was part laugh, part growl. You tracked the poison. Gabriel's curse leaves traces, Elena confirmed. Breadcrumbs that lead back to the victim. I've been following them for days. And the Iron Wolves? Sarah asked. Do they know I'm here? Not yet. But they will. Gabriel will sense when the curse is broken, and he'll come looking for whoever interfered with his handiwork. The trap was closing around them from all sides. The Iron Wolves wanted Marcus's territory. Gabriel wanted to complete his genocide. The society wanted Sarah to embrace her hunter heritage. And caught in the middle were 2 children who'd already lost one parent to this supernatural war. Sarah looked at Marcus, seeing the way his breathing had grown more labored during their conversation. The silver poisoning was winning, eating away at him from the inside. Soon, very soon, the choice would be taken away from her entirely. The blessed bullets, she said to Elena. What exactly do they do? Elena's eyes gleamed with something like pride. They're not just silver, they're forged with hunter blood, blessed with ancient words of binding. One shot, anywhere on the body, and even an alpha werewolf dies permanently. No regeneration, no second chances. And breaking the curse would require you to cut yourself, mix your blood with his, and speak words that will bind you to his life force permanently. Elena's voice grew grave. Hunter blood and werewolf blood, mixed by choice rather than violence. It would save him, but it would also mark you as a traitor to your own species. The weight of the decision settled on Sarah's shoulders like a physical thing. Save Marcus and damn herself in the eyes of her family's legacy, or let him die and honor 4 generations of Martinez hunters. But as she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw not a monster, but a man who'd been willing to die rather than abandon those under his protection. A man who'd shown her children nothing but gentleness despite his capacity for violence. A man she was falling in love with, despite everything logic and self-preservation told her. "There's something else," Elena said quietly. "Something you need to know about your son." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What about Jake? The gift he has, the ability to sense werewolves, it's not just supernatural sensitivity." Elena's voice grew gentle, as if she was delivering a terminal diagnosis. "It's hunter instinct awakening early. He's identifying threats, cataloging weaknesses. By the time he reaches puberty, he'll be able to kill werewolves with his bare hands." The room went deadly silent. Sarah looked at Marcus, seeing the knowledge in his eyes that he'd suspected this truth, but hoped he was wrong. "My baby," Sarah whispered, "will grow up to be one of the finest hunters our bloodline has ever produced," Elena finished. "Unless you choose to corrupt that gift by saving the very creature he was born to destroy." Chapter 5. The howl that split the night air wasn't from Marcus's pack. Sarah jerked awake from where she dozed in the chair beside Marcus's makeshift sickbed, her heart hammering as the otherworldly sound echoed across her property. Through the living room windows, she could see Razor's men scrambling to defensive positions, their movements sharp and coordinated despite being roused from sleep. "Iron wolves," Marcus gasped, struggling to sit up despite his weakness. The silver poisoning had worsened throughout the night, his skin taking on a grayish pallor that made Sarah's medical training scream warnings about organ failure. Elena appeared in the doorway like a ghost, still fully dressed despite the late hour. "How many?" she asked Razor, who was speaking urgently into a radio. "At least 50, Razor replied grimly. "They've got us surrounded." Sarah was already moving toward the stairs. "I need to get the kids." "No time," Elena said, grabbing her arm. "Listen." In the sudden quiet between radio chatter and shouted orders from the pack, Sarah heard it. The sound of motorcycles approaching fast from the north, their engines roaring through the night like mechanical wolves announcing their arrival. "They're coming straight up the driveway," Razor said, moving to the window with fluid grace despite his size. "Bold bastards aren't even trying to be subtle." Through the glass, Sarah could see headlights cutting through the darkness, dozens of them in perfect formation. But these weren't the orderly ranks of Marcus's pack. These bikes moved with predatory aggression, weaving and circling like hunters preparing to bring down wounded prey. "They know I'm weak," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're making their play for the territory." The lead motorcycle roared into the yard, and Sarah got her first good look at the Iron Wolves. Where Marcus's pack carried themselves with disciplined authority, these men radiated barely controlled violence. Their leader was a mountain of a man with a shaved head covered in tattoos that seemed to writhe in the harsh glare of motorcycle headlights. "Donovan," Razor spat. "The Iron Wolf Alpha." Donovan killed his engine and dismounted, his movements deliberate and theatrical. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the yard with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Death's Head Pack," he called out. "By rights of challenge and conquest, I claim this territory. Send out your Alpha, so he can surrender with whatever dignity he has left." "Go to hell," Razor shouted back from the window. Donovan's laugh was like broken glass. "Your Alpha is dying, Lieutenant. We can all smell the silver rot on him. This territory is already ours. We're just making it official." Sarah watched 2 Iron Wolves dismount and drag someone from the back of a cargo bike. Her blood turned to ice when she recognized the small figure struggling against their grip. "Jake," she breathed. Her 5-year-old son was fighting his captors with the desperate fury of a cornered animal, but even Sarah could see it was hopeless. The Iron Wolves held him easily, and when the taller one cuffed Jake across the head to stop his struggling, Sarah's vision went red. "Let him go," she screamed, lunging for the door. Elena caught her arm with surprising strength. "That's exactly what they want you to do. The moment you step outside, you're dead." "Then what do you suggest?" Sarah snarled. "Let them hurt my baby?" Donovan's voice carried across the yard again. "We have something that belongs to you, Death's Head. A little gift, perfectly trained to hunt our kind when he grows up. We'll make you a deal, your territory in exchange for the boy." "They know," Marcus said, his voice carrying a note of terrible understanding. "They know what Jake is." Elena nodded grimly. "Gabriel told them. He's been tracking hunter bloodlines, identifying gifted children before they come of age." "For what?" Sarah demanded. "Training," Elena replied. "The Iron Wolves don't just want to rule supernatural territory. They want to own the next generation of hunters. Turn them against their own nature." Through the window, Sarah could see Jake's small face in the harsh motorcycle lights. He wasn't crying. Her brave little boy was glaring at his captors with defiance that reminded her painfully of Tommy, but she could see the fear in his eyes. "Ghost!" Donovan called out, using Marcus's road name. "I know you can hear me. Come out and face your death like an alpha, or watch us turn your precious human's boy into something that will hunt his own sister." Marcus tried to stand and collapsed back onto the couch with a grunt of pain. The effort left him gasping, sweat beading on his forehead as the silver poisoning fought every attempt his body made to heal. "I have to go out there," he said. "You can barely sit up," Sarah said fiercely. "You go out there, you die. And if I don't, your son dies worse," Marcus replied. "Or worse than dies, they'll break him, remake him into a weapon against everything he was born to protect." Razor stepped away from the window, his scarred face grim. "We can't win this fight, not with Ghost down. Even if we could take Donovan's pack, we'd lose too many. And there are other territories watching, waiting to see who comes out on top. So we surrender?" Sarah asked. "We retreat," Razor corrected. "Fall back, regroup, try to save who we can." "And abandon Jake?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Sarah looked between the three of them. Elena with her hunter's cold assessment of odds, Razor with his tactical understanding of a losing battle, Marcus with his desperate desire to protect everyone and his complete inability to do so. "There's another way," she said quietly. Elena's eyes sharpened. "Mija, no. Whatever you're thinking. The blood bonding ritual you mentioned. Hunter blood can neutralize the silver poisoning." "Theoretically," Elena said. "But it's never been attempted. The risks could kill both of you," Razor finished. "And even if it worked, Ghost would need time to recover. Time we don't have." Sarah moved to the window, studying the scene in her yard. Donovan's pack had formed a loose circle around the farmhouse, but they weren't pressing their advantage. They were waiting, confident in their superiority. "How long would the ritual take?" she asked Elena. "If it worked, maybe an hour for the blood bond to stabilize, another few hours for his strength to return. And if I used my hunter abilities? The instincts you say I inherited?" Elena's expression grew wary. "What are you thinking?" Sarah picked up the wooden box containing the blessed bullets, feeling their cold weight in her hands. "You said these could kill even an alpha werewolf. What if I used them on someone else?" Understanding dawned in Elena's dark eyes. "You want to challenge Donovan directly." "I want to buy Marcus time to heal," Sarah corrected. "Challenge Donovan to single combat, stall while the blood bonding works." "You're not trained," Elena protested. "You've never even held a gun properly, let alone faced a werewolf alpha in combat." "Then train me. Fast." Marcus grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Sarah, no. I won't let you die for me." She looked down at him, seeing the man who'd been willing to sacrifice himself for strangers, who'd shown her children nothing but gentleness despite his capacity for violence. The man she'd fallen in love with despite every rational reason not to. "It's not just for you," she said quietly. "It's for Jake. For Emma. For every person in this territory who'll suffer if the Iron Wolves take over." She pulled away from his grip and faced Elena. "You came here to give me a choice. This is my choice. Train me to fight, perform the ritual, and help me save my son." Elena studied her granddaughter's face for a long moment, seeing something there that made her nod slowly. "Very well. But we do this my way, completely. No hesitation, no second-guessing." "Agreed." Elena opened her satchel and began pulling out items. Not just the blessed bullets, but a silver knife that gleamed with its own light, a leather pouch filled with herbs, and a small vial of what looked like mercury. "The blood bonding first," she said, moving toward Marcus. "That will take the most time." "Wait," Marcus said, his voice stronger despite his condition. "You need to understand what this means, Sarah. Blood bonding between hunter and werewolf, it's permanent. You'll be able to sense my emotions, my physical condition, for the rest of your life. And I'll be able to sense yours. Like a psychic link. More than that. If one of us dies violently, the other feels it. If one of us is in pain, the other knows. There's no undoing it once the ritual is complete. Sarah met his golden eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, the fear that she'd reject the connection once she understood its implications. Will it save you? She asked. Yes. Then we do it. Elena had Marcus lie flat on the couch and instructed Sarah to kneel beside him. Give me your hand, she said, taking the silver knife. The blade bit into Sarah's palm, drawing a thin line of blood that welled up dark in the lamplight. Elena made a matching cut on Marcus's palm, then pressed their hands together. Now the words, Elena said, beginning to chant in a language Sarah didn't recognize. The syllables seemed to hang in the air, heavy with power and ancient purpose. Sarah felt heat building where her palm touched Marcus's, a warmth that spread up her arm and into her chest. Marcus's eyes were locked on hers, and she could see something changing in them, the gold becoming brighter, more intense. It's working, Marcus breathed, and Sarah could feel his amazement as if it were her own emotion. The heat intensified, and suddenly Sarah could sense everything. Marcus's pain as the silver poison fought against her blood, his surprise at the strength of the connection forming between them, his deep well of love for his pack, and his growing feelings for her. Phase 1 complete, Elena said, pulling their hands apart. Both cuts had healed, leaving only faint silver scars that seemed to pulse with shared heartbeat. Marcus was already looking better, color returning to his cheeks, his breathing easier. But Sarah could feel through their new bond that he was still weak, still in danger if he tried to fight too soon. Outside, Donovan's voice carried across the yard again. Your time's running out, Ghost. Send out your lieutenant if you don't have the balls to face me yourself. Now for your training, Elena said, picking up one of the blessed bullets. This isn't about marksmanship, it's about hunter instinct. The bullet will find its target if you trust your blood. She showed Sarah how to load the ancient revolver, her movements quick and efficient. One shot is all you'll get. Miss, and Donovan will tear you apart before you can reload. I won't miss, Sarah said, surprised by the certainty in her voice. Something was awakening in her blood, something that had been dormant since childhood. She could feel it stirring, predatory instincts that recognized Donovan as a threat, knowledge that seemed to flow from genetic memory. The challenge has to be formal, Elena continued. Old laws older than any pack or territory. He has to accept single combat if you offer it correctly. And if he refuses? He can't. Not without losing face in front of his pack. Alpha werewolves don't back down from challenges, especially not from humans. Sarah checked the revolver's cylinder, feeling the weight of the blessed bullet. Through her bond with Marcus, she could sense his strength returning slowly, his body beginning to fight off the silver poisoning. How long do I need to stall? She asked. 2 hours minimum, Elena replied. 3 to be safe. 2 hours of single combat with a werewolf alpha. Sarah's laugh held no humor. Any other encouraging advice? Elena's expression softened. You are your mother's daughter, Mija. And your mother once held off an entire vampire coven until sunrise. Trust your blood, it knows what to do. Outside, engines revved impatiently. Sarah could see through the window that some of the iron wolves were growing restless, eager for violence. It's time, Marcus said, using the couch arm to pull himself upright. He was still pale, still weak, but Sarah could feel through their bond that he was healing. Sarah, if something goes wrong. Nothing will go wrong, she said firmly. I won't let them hurt Jake. She kissed him then, quick and fierce, tasting the promise of a future neither of them might live to see. Stay alive, she whispered against his lips. Both of us stay alive. Sarah walked to the front door, the blessed revolver heavy in her hand. Behind her, she could hear Elena beginning another chant, something to accelerate Marcus's healing. Through their bond, she felt his desperate love, his terror at letting her face this danger alone. She opened the door and stepped onto the porch, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. Every iron wolf in the yard turned toward her, their eyes reflecting the harsh motorcycle lights like a pack of real wolves. Donovan's laugh boomed across the farmyard. Well, the human comes out to play. Where's your alpha, little girl? Right here, Sarah called back, her voice carrying with surprising authority. I am Sarah Martinez, blood bonded to Marcus Kellerman, alpha of the Death's Head Pack. I challenge you, Donovan of the Iron Wolves, to single combat for the life of my son and the rights to this territory. The yard went dead silent. Even the motorcycle engines seemed to quiet in the face of her formal challenge. Donovan's expression shifted from amusement to something like respect. You know the old laws. I know my rights, Sarah replied. Do you accept, or are the Iron Wolves too weak to face one human woman? It was a calculated insult, designed to make backing down impossible. Sarah could see Donovan's pack watching their alpha, waiting for his response. Donovan began to strip off his leather vest, revealing arms covered in tattoos and scars. "I accept your challenge, Sarah Martinez. But when I kill you, your son becomes mine to train." "When you lose," Sarah corrected, "you return my son and withdraw from Death's Head territory permanently." "Agreed." Donovan began the change, his body shifting and expanding as he took his werewolf form. Sarah raised the blessed revolver, feeling hunter instincts flood through her blood like fire. Around the yard, both packs watched in tense silence as human and werewolf faced off under the hunter's moon. The battle for her family and her heart was about to begin. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to be the first to get notified when the part 2 of this story drops.